So this first dynasty, it lasted for about 464 years. And if we have a look at some of the serics of these kings, then we're going to see the development of the 5 titles of a king of Egypt. So let's have a look at Djet's seric. Now, you've got these shapes, these hieroglyphs like this. And on this one here, you've got a red crown. And on this one here, you've got a falcon. These shapes here represent Nebtawi, the twin lands. So remember the titles of the king from the 3rd dynasty on. He was Horus. He was also the Nebtawi, the lord of 2 lands. Okay, so you can clearly see it here. If we have a look at Den's seric, we've got those Nebtawi again, but this time on this side we've got a B, which represents Upper Egypt, and on the other side the Egyptians later called it the Sedge. Well, it's a papyrus reed representing Lower Egypt. So here we've got the formation of titles for future kings. The Second Dynasty was a much shorter affair, only lasted 204 years. Okay, so let's have a look at Hotep Sekma. He ruled Egypt for 38 years, and you can see with this seric that he's clearly got a falcon there. Then we're looking at his son Nineteh. He ruled Egypt for 47 years. Now, in his later part of his reign, there was a famine. Now, let's say, well, famine only happens because there's a lack of a flood. No flood, no black silt from the Ethiopian mountains, unable to grow crops. But Egypt was a very productive country. We believe that it overproduced with wheat and barley, so there would have been surpluses. So let's say the first year the rains didn't come in Ethiopia, and then the second year the rains didn't come. There would still been a surplus to carry them over. It's a third or maybe a fourth lack of a flood that brings a famine. So when Nineteh died, the country was divided. His second son ruled one part of the country, and his eldest son, Prisbun, ruled the other. Now, what's interesting is Peresbun is sometimes called Seth Peresbun. Maybe he was ruling Lower Egypt, or maybe he was ruling Upper Egypt, and he took that Seth name to show that he was closely associated with Lower Egypt. Anyway, when the famine was over, he ruled both lands in his own right. When he died, his successor Karishemwe ruled Egypt for around about 30 years, but there was a rebellion in Lower Egypt during his kingship. Now, some archaeologists, sort of 20-30 years ago, said, oh, there was always this underlying movement in Lower Egypt, that they weren't happy that their lands had been conquered by the Upper Egyptians. Well, come on. It's 400 years later, man. You know, it's a lot of time has passed since that happened. So you're saying that roughly 10 generations of Egyptians are harbouring grudges. Nobody had histories to follow in those days. Even if it was passed down verbally, they'd look around. The ancient Egyptians were always very practical people. Even when their country was ruled by foreigners, they'd look around and think, we've got food, we've got life, we've got water, we've got peace. Let's just get on with it and we can worship our gods. Those are the 3 things that they really cared about, was food, water, children, preparing the tomb, and going to the afterlife, the real life to come, because their lives in Egypt were so short because of the Bilharzia worm. Remember, 30 to 45 is the average life cycle for 70% of the ancient Egyptians. So this rebellion, maybe the rebellion was a cousin of the king who thought, well, I'm gonna take a really big army down there. I'm really gonna teach them a lesson. So the battle happened somewhere outside of the city of Nechen, and the Lower Egyptians lost. And the king I can hardly say it. It's very difficult to pronounce. Khaswig Himwe commissioned 2 statues, and he said that on his statues, he said that 47,209 Egyptians were killed during the battle, the Lower Egyptians. Wow. Wow. Can you imagine? That must have been a bloody affair. Think of the weapons that they were using during those times. If we look at the Narmer palette, Narmer is holding a mace. That's a real African weapon. It's got a wooden handle, stone ball at the top, and you bring it down and crack it into somebody's head. In those days, the army was made up from the local farmers and the herdsmen, so no one would have any helmets or headgear, that sort of thing. Other weapons would have been everyday tools, really. So flint axes, a flint axe. Wow. So you've got a flint mounted on a wooden handle, and that was used to smite someone on the head. Bang. Ouch. This is going to be a real bloody affair. The scimitar originally started off as a wooden tool, and on the wooden tool you mounted flints, slithers of flint, and it was used by farmers to cut down the wheat and barley in the fields. Well, when the leader of Lower Egypt called upon his workforce to form an army, that's what the farmers brought with them on both sides, and they would have gone for a neck shot or an arm or a leg. Okay, so that battle, first of all, it was bloody, awful, terrible. What a huge loss of life. 47,209, and the Egyptians were always counting everything. They always wanted accurate figures for everything, especially when they started implementing taxation. Everything had to be counted. The animals had to be counted every 2 years. All the wheat had to be measured. Everything was counted. So the fact that they got 47,209 makes me believe that that was an accurate count of the dead for Lower Egypt. So let's say that that is a good figure. That probably meant that the army coming down from Lower Egypt was 50,000 strong. So that's an amazing feat, transporting 50,000 people 600 miles into Upper Egypt. So it was a full-blown rebellion. The king must have left his capital at Memphis and hurried down into the south pretty quick, right the way down to the ancient capital of Horus himself, and the home of Narmer. And that battle outside the city, somewhere in the desert, must have been awful. Absolutely awful. Anyway, on the back of this victory, the king built his tomb at Abydos as well, and it had over 50 rooms in it. So the types of burial in these early dynastic times is a shaft, okay, leading down to a burial chamber, and then on top you have your chapel. You have all your rooms that your spirit will use when it comes back from the afterlife, and it will reside in the tomb until night time comes, and it will pass through the duat to get to the afterlife. And remember, the idea of kingship and the afterlife is led by the king. So this is an exciting time in Egypt. These are the foundation, the building blocks for future kings. And of course, the legacy of the first and second dynastical families is they left a very stable country of union, the first national state in the world for the third dynasty. And that enabled the third dynasty to start building large mastaba tombs, step mastaba tombs that we call the step pyramid, and then of course pyramids. Wow, so this is quite an important time, and you can follow that footprint. That's what I love about the ancient Egyptian civilization, is you can follow the footprint of how everything develops. So from this first Serik, then in comes the Nebtawi, then in the third dynasty and the fourth dynasty, the Golden Horus. Then you see the cartouche, the first cartouche appears. And remember, the cartouche is called the Shimu. It follows the distance of the sun going round the universe. Then the second cartouche appears at the end of the sixth dynasty, because they didn't want people to know their real name. So you can follow this footprint through their timeline. That's what I love about the ancient Egyptians. There's no secrets, there's no mysteries, nothing is lost. It's all there. It's all there just to enjoy. And that's why I became an archaeologist. That's why I've always studied these people, because they left such a fabulous footprint. And this is what is happening in ancient Egypt later on became the foundations for Western civilization. But that's another video. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a video on chronology, explain who created the Egyptian timeline, who created the 30-odd dynasties. So that will be the next project. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. Subscribe. Please tell your friends. The more subscriptions I get, the more I can apply for that domain name. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye for now.